I never expected my life to unravel in a single moment. It all started with a phone call that felt like any other but quickly turned into the nightmare I'd been dreading without even knowing it. That evening, Zachary was upstairs working on his homework and I was downstairs, trying to unwind after a long day at the hospital. The phone rang. Jose's name flashed on the screen. A close friend and someone I trusted. But what he was about to tell me would shake me to my core. "Stanley, I need to tell you something. It's hard, but you deserve to know the truth," Jose said, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt a pit open in my stomach, but I urged him to speak. What came next was like a punch to the gut. Sherry and Paul, my wife and my brother, had been seeing each other behind my back for months. Not just secretly meeting, they'd been living a double life, weaving lies and deceit that had eroded the foundation of my family without me even realizing it. At first, my mind refused to accept it. I thought maybe it was a misunderstanding or a twisted rumor, but the details Jose shared were too clear, too precise. I could feel my hands trembling, heart racing, as the cold wave of betrayal swept over me. How could they do this? How could the people I loved most betray me so completely? The shock froze me in place. I replayed every memory I had with Sherry, every smile, every touch, now tainted by the harsh reality that it had all been a lie. And Paul, my own brother, the one I trusted to have my back through anything, was part of this betrayal. The weight of their actions crushed me. That night, sleep was impossible. My mind raced with painful questions and endless scenarios. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I thought about Zachary, my son, my anchor in the storm, and the life I still needed to protect. No matter how much it hurt, I knew I had to find the strength to move forward. The next morning, I confronted Sherry. Her face was a mask of calm, but I saw the flicker of guilt in her eyes. She didn't deny it. Paul was already gone, avoiding any confrontation. Their betrayal wasn't just a personal wound, it was a betrayal of trust that shattered the entire family. For days, I walked through the house like a ghost, feeling lost in what used to be my home. But somewhere beneath the pain, a fire started to burn. I refused to be defined by their lies. For Zachary, for myself, I made a silent vow. I would rebuild, I would survive, and I would rise stronger from this devastation. That moment marked the end of one life and the beginning of another, a life built on resilience, on fighting through the darkness, and on finding new strength in the broken pieces. The days after the betrayal were the hardest I'd ever faced. Every familiar corner of the house felt like a reminder of the lies that had unfolded beneath my nose. Sherry's empty side of the bed, the quiet absence of Paul, and the silence between Zachary and me, all of it screamed that nothing would ever be the same. But what surprised me most was Zachary. I expected anger, confusion, maybe even resentment. Instead, I found a strength in him that mirrored my own resolve. One evening, I found him sitting quietly on the back porch, staring off into the distance, his face unreadable. "Everything okay, Dad?" he asked softly when I joined him. I sat beside him and took a deep breath. Jose called. Told me everything about Sherry and Paul. Zachary didn't say anything for a moment. His silence was heavy, but when he finally spoke, there was a quiet conviction in his voice. "Are you going to help them?" I shook my head slowly. "No. They made their choices, Zach. Now they have to live with the consequences. Our life is here with the people who truly care about us." His relief was visible, a weight lifting from his shoulders. "I'm glad. They don't deserve your help, not after everything." In that moment, I realized something important. We were no longer victims. We were survivors. And survivors don't cling to the wreckage of broken promises. We rebuild. The support from our circle of friends became our lifeline. Whitney, who had moved to the city for a fresh start of her own, quickly became one of our closest allies. Her own story of betrayal gave her a unique empathy, and together we found solace in shared pain and hope. One night, as Kyle and his parents arrived for a dinner we'd planned weeks earlier, I felt a rare peace settle over me. Around the table were faces that represented loyalty and love. Kyle, Zachary's steadfast friend who had stood by us through the worst, Judge Backer and his wife, whose wisdom and kindness had been a guiding light, and Whitney, a fellow survivor who had rebuilt her life with courage. Whitney raised her glass. "To new beginnings and to the family we choose." Glasses clinked, conversations flowed, and in that moment, the darkness that had threatened to consume us seemed to lift. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were thriving. Each of us had found strength in the scars left behind. Later, as our guests left and the night grew quiet, Zachary approached me with a grin. "Dad, we both have some time off coming up. How about a camping trip? Just you and me." My heart swelled. "That sounds perfect, Zach. Let's do it." As we planned our trip, laughter echoed through the house. For the first time in months, hope wasn't just a distant dream, it was real. We had taken the shattered pieces of our past and built something new. Something beautiful. This life we were creating, it was built on trust, resilience, and an unbreakable bond between father and son. No matter what challenges awaited, I knew we would face them together. We were fighters, survivors, and above all, family. The camping trip with Zachary was more than just a getaway. It was a chance to reconnect, to heal the wounds left by years of deception and heartbreak. Out in the wilderness, away from the constant reminders of betrayal, we found peace in the simplicity of nature and the strength of each other's company. We spent days hiking through dense forests, fishing by the quiet lake, and sitting by the campfire sharing stories under the stars. Each moment was a step toward rebuilding what had been broken, not just between us, but within ourselves. One evening, as the fire crackled and the night wrapped around us, Zachary turned to me, his voice steady but filled with unspoken pain. "Dad, do you ever wonder what might have been if things were different? If Sherry and Paul hadn't betrayed us?" I looked at him, the flickering flames casting shadows across his determined face. "Every day. But I've come to realize that dwelling on what could have been only keeps us trapped. The past is a place to learn from, not to live in." Zachary nodded, but I could see the struggle beneath his calm exterior. The betrayal had cut deep, not just into our family, but into the very core of who we were. It was a shadow that threatened to follow us forever. Back home, the days were busy but filled with purpose. I threw myself into my work, determined to make a difference beyond my personal pain. The surgery on Lily Chun had become a turning point in my career, a symbol of hope and renewal. Each successful operation reminded me that healing was possible even after the deepest wounds. Zachary's dedication to his studies inspired me. Watching him volunteer at shelters for abuse victims using his own story to offer hope was both humbling and uplifting. He was becoming a young man who refused to be defined by his past, who chose compassion over bitterness. Whitney's presence remained a constant comfort. Her work as a counselor for victims of financial abuse was a reminder that we were not alone in our struggles. Together, we organized charity events, raising awareness and helping others find their own paths to healing. Yet, despite our progress, the shadow of Sherry and Paul lingered. News of their conviction for fraud and embezzlement was a bitter confirmation of the darkness we had escaped. Their fall from grace was public and devastating, a cautionary tale about greed and betrayal. I often thought about the Starlight Motel, the place where our lives had changed forever. Its demolition and replacement with a community center symbolized a new beginning, a transformation from pain to purpose. As Zachary and I stood on the porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt a profound gratitude. We had survived the worst and emerged stronger. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but with family and friends by our side, we were ready to face whatever came next. This was more than survival. It was a rebirth. And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed in the future we were building together. Returning from the camping trip, the renewed bond between Zachary and me felt like a solid foundation beneath my feet. The wilderness had cleared the fog of past pain, but the real work was just beginning, rebuilding our lives, brick by brick, around the values of trust, resilience, and genuine connection. Our home quickly became a sanctuary, not just for us, but for the circle of friends and chosen family who stood by us through the darkest days. Kyle, Zachary's loyal friend, was often there, his unwavering support a reminder that loyalty still existed in a world that had shown us so much betrayal. Judge Baxter and his wife, too, were constants in our lives, providing wisdom and comfort that transcended mere friendship. Their home was a second refuge where holidays and quiet Sunday dinners brought warmth and laughter. The judge's semi-retirement allowed him to offer advice and guidance, both personal and professional, often bridging the gap between law and medicine in conversations with me. Whitney's friendship deepened as well. Her own scars made her a powerful ally. Together, we became advocates not just for ourselves, but for countless others who had suffered betrayal and abuse. The charity events we organized raised awareness, funds, and hope. In her, I saw a reflection of resilience, a survivor who refused to let her past define her. Professionally, I continued to push boundaries. The breakthroughs in pediatric cardiology that had begun with Lily Chun's surgery were just the start. Invitations to speak at international conferences allowed me to share innovations and learn from peers worldwide. Yet, despite the growing recognition, I remained grounded, always returning home to the people who mattered most. Zachary's final year at Johns Hopkins was intense, but his commitment never wavered. His volunteer work at shelters was more than a pastime, it was a mission. Using his story to inspire others, he became a beacon of hope for those trapped in cycles of abuse and betrayal. But life was not without its challenges. There were moments when memories of Sherry and Paul's deceit stirred anger and sadness. Their sentences, harsh and deserved, echoed in our minds. Sherry, once proud and manipulative, was now a shadow behind prison walls, cut off from the family she had destroyed. Paul, the mastermind, was isolated and disgraced, his medical license revoked, a ghost of the man he once was. Despite the bitterness, I chose not to be consumed by revenge or resentment. Instead, I focused on what lay ahead. The future Zachary and I were crafting, built on the lessons of the past but driven by hope. One evening, as we gathered with Kyle, Whitney, and the Baxters for dinner, I raised my glass. To new beginnings, I said, catching Zachary's eye. And to the family we choose. The clinking of glasses was more than a toast, it was a declaration. We had weathered the storm and emerged stronger. Our family wasn't defined by blood or betrayal, but by loyalty, love, and the unbreakable bonds forged in fire. As laughter filled the room, I knew we were ready. Ready to face whatever challenges the future held, confident that together we could overcome anything. Even as we built a new life filled with hope and support, the shadows of the past lingered, refusing to fade quietly. The fallout from Sherry and Paul's betrayal wasn't something we could simply walk away from. It demanded reckoning, justice, and ultimately, closure. Months after the Starlight Motel scandal broke, the investigation intensified. What began as a personal crisis had unraveled into a sprawling web of financial fraud, embezzlement, and deceit. The charity that Paul and Sherry had once led with a veneer of respectability was revealed to be a front for years of illegal activities, siphoning millions from those who trusted them. Stanley's initial report to the authorities had been the spark that ignited the investigation. He remained a central figure throughout the legal process, cooperating fully with prosecutors and investigators. His professionalism never faltered, but behind the scenes, the emotional toll was immense. Each hearing, each courtroom session dredged up painful memories and renewed the weight of betrayal. Sherry's fate was grim but unsurprising. The once proud woman who had manipulated and deceived was sentenced to 15 years in a federal penitentiary. Her letters, once desperate and pleading, went unanswered. The harsh realities of prison life offered her little solace, only time for reflection on the choices that cost her family, freedom, and future. Paul, the mastermind, faced a sterner judgment. His sentence, 25 years in a maximum security prison, reflected his leading role in the schemes. Stripped of his medical license and isolated from even his fellow inmates, he existed as a cautionary tale of how far a man could fall when greed eclipses integrity. Though justice was served, the emotional scars remained. For Stanley and Zachary, the pain of family betrayal was not easily healed by courtroom verdicts. Yet, they found comfort in the knowledge that those who once sought to destroy them were now paying the price. The charity, despite the devastation, was not lost. Thanks largely to Stanley's anonymous donations and efforts to stabilize the organization, it slowly recovered. New leadership implemented stricter financial controls and transparency measures, transforming the once corrupt institution into a thriving support network for families affected by abuse and fraud. Perhaps most symbolically, the Starlight Motel itself was demolished 2 years after the scandal. In its place rose a community center, funded partly by Stanley's contributions. This center became a beacon of hope, offering support groups and resources for victims of infidelity and financial abuse, a testament to healing and renewal born from tragedy. Throughout this turbulent time, Stanley never lost sight of what truly mattered, the life he shared with Zachary and their chosen family. The bonds forged in adversity were stronger than ever, their shared resilience a shield against any lingering shadows. One evening, standing on the porch of their home, Stanley held Zachary's acceptance letter to medical school. The weight of those words, the culmination of years of struggle and determination, filled him with pride and hope. Behind him, laughter echoed from inside the house, Zachary celebrating with Kyle, Whitney, and the Baxters. It was a sound that reassured Stanley of one undeniable truth: this was their true family, the ones who stood by them, loved them, and chose to build a future together. The betrayal that once threatened to ruin them had instead become the catalyst for a life richer and more meaningful than they had ever imagined. As Stanley watched the sunset, he understood finally that survival was not enough. They had learned to thrive. 5 years had passed since that fateful night at the Starlight Motel. 5 long years since Stanley discovered the truth that shattered his world, but also started the rebuilding of it. Time, as it does, softens some wounds while deepening others. Yet, through every trial, through every challenge, our family, reborn not in blood, but in love, loyalty, and resilience, had only grown stronger. Stanley had become a name of great respect in the medical community. His pioneering work in pediatric cardiology, especially the surgery that saved Lily Chun's life, had led to invitations to international conferences, collaborative research projects, and mentorship programs. But accolades and awards had never been his goal. What mattered most was impact, and every child he saved reminded him why he fought so hard to stay grounded through all the chaos. Still, he never allowed his professional identity to eclipse his role as a father. Zachary, now 22, had just graduated from Johns Hopkins pre-med with top honors. Stanley had been there in the front row, eyes glassy with pride, heart full to the brim as he watched his son step onto the stage to receive his degree. After the ceremony, they embraced for a long, silent moment, no words needed. That hug spoke of pain endured, strength inherited, and hope passed from one generation to the next. Their annual camping trips remained sacred. It was their ritual of connection, just the two of them under the stars, trading stories, sharing quiet moments, sometimes talking about everything, sometimes about nothing at all. In those woods, away from the noise of the world, they found clarity. Peace. Whitney had blossomed in her own way. Now a respected counselor specializing in financial and emotional abuse, she guided others through the storms she once endured. She and Stanley had never pursued romance, though some had wondered. What they shared was deeper, a bond of survival, a profound mutual respect, and a partnership rooted in purpose. Together, they had hosted multiple charity events, raised thousands of dollars, and helped rewrite the stories of dozens of broken families. Kyle Baxter, forever loyal, had become family in every sense. Now in his third year of law school, inspired by the strength he'd seen in Zachary and Stanley, he focused on advocacy for abuse victims and nonprofit protection. His bond with Zachary remained unshakable, their friendship now entering adulthood without a hint of fading. They were brothers in all but name. Judge Baxter and his wife had become true parental figures to Stanley. Their home was still the default destination for holidays and Sunday dinners. The judge, now semi-retired, often invited Stanley to consult on complex medical cases tied to legal disputes. The professional respect between them had evolved into a cherished friendship. Even Dr. Torres, now retired, stayed involved as a mentor to young doctors. He always boasted about his boy Stanley, claiming that spotting his potential was his greatest professional achievement. He never tired of hearing about Zachary either, proudly declaring to all who would listen that Stanley's son, proof that strength runs in the family. And what of Sherry and Paul? Their fall was total and public. Paul remained locked away in a maximum security prison, his once charismatic charm replaced by cold silence. Stripped of everything, his title, his status, his influence, he faded into obscurity. Other inmates, disgusted by his betrayal of family and community, gave him a wide berth. He was alone, just as he had made Stanley feel years before. Sherry's 15-year sentence left her in a women's federal facility where time moved slow and unkind. Her attempts to reach out to Stanley and Zachary ceased after years of returned letters. Perhaps she finally understood the magnitude of her betrayal. Or perhaps she no longer had anything left to say. Her downfall served as a cautionary tale, her name synonymous with greed and destruction in their former community. The Starlight Motel, once a symbol of betrayal, no longer stood. In its place, thanks in part to a large anonymous donation from Stanley, stood the Harmony Center, a sanctuary for those healing from infidelity, abuse, and financial trauma. Inside its walls, stories were shared, tears were dried, and lives were rebuilt. The place where Stanley's old life had died now gave birth to new hope for others. On the evening of Zachary's medical school acceptance, Stanley stood on the porch holding the letter. Inside, Whitney, Kyle, and the Baxters celebrated around the table. Laughter and warmth drifted through the windows. Stanley smiled and allowed himself a long breath. He had not just survived the worst chapter of his life, he had rewritten its ending. This was not a story about betrayal after all. It was a story about rebirth. A story of a father and son who had refused to be defined by the pain others inflicted on them. A story of community, friendship, perseverance, and the unshakable power of integrity. They had forged something indestructible, not in comfort but in fire. And it would stand for generations. As Stanley stepped back inside and raised his glass with the people who had become his family, he felt no bitterness. No regret. Only gratitude for the storm that forced him to rebuild. And for the life, more beautiful than he ever imagined, that rose from the ashes.